Generally, I don't give any cash. Anyone who's around my businesses that I feel can help, I give them options. I give them shares. I don't actually give them cash. I want them to have true skin in the game. If my business does well, they do well. If my business doesn't do well, then they don't do well either. We're all one team. We're all tied together. The moment they ask for cash, I'm like, no, this is not the right person.
Welcome to Happy Millionaire, a show about how to make profit with a positive impact and stay happy along the way. How excited are you about the podcast awards? Your boy's going to be presenting an award on Saturday. You're coming.
Yeah. No, I'm excited. I'm just excited to just see what the group of people are like in that room. Right. I'm not really part of the podcast community.
Who do you want to meet? There's going to be quite a few big podcasters out there, man.
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about like some pretty big podcasters. Who would you want to meet?
Yeah, to be honest, I think I don't really have a favorite podcaster. I do really like different flavors from different folks. I think I really like what Rangan's doing. I think he's a really deep dude as well. So I really probably, if he's there, it'd be good to see him. I think Fern Cotton's really fun, exciting person. So obviously Stephen Bartlett's doing, I think his podcast is great as well. So I think these are the ones that I've listened to previously. So, if they're there, they're there.
Steve has got some weird knack of making all of his guests cry. I've been watching some of his reels will always pop up whenever I'm on Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's just of his guests is bawling. He's got Malcolm Gladwell, I think, on this week. He's bawling his eyes out. Simon Sinek was choking up. I'm pretty sure Adesanya as well was crying his eyes. This guy's the modern male version of Oprah Winfrey. He's just creating breakdowns. I think that's secret. You got to start crying.
You know what? He's just a great life coach. Essentially, it's like a life coach session. I feel that's how he's set it up, right? He's really going deep. He'll find the trauma, and he just, in a weird way, he's healing that person. I feel as well. Okay, there's probably some done for the public. For us, it might be a bit more dramatic, but at the end of the day, I feel it's just it's a watching into someone's life coach session, right? That's how I see it.
Cool. What do you have on your list?
Yeah, so I guess the first one, so it's actually about team meetings, right? So I don't know, everyone loves and hates them, right? Everyone has them, and it's a coin flip whether the meeting's going to be good or not, right? And there's basically one thing that I've noticed this year more than ever, and it's something that happens all the time in meetings, but people just don't realize. So therefore, it's just it doesn't really get any recognition. Basically, what it is people really being comfortable with silences. So I don't know if you've noticed, but as soon as there's a silence in a meeting, literally everyone feels this anxiety and just has to speak or say something because they don't, I guess it's that element of loneliness, is that worry that, hey, if we're not speaking, we're not one team. Yeah, I just feel that if we can have that silence, it creates a bit more space to reflect and think and also take in what's happening. It's actually a good thing. And actually, if you're from, if you actually compare the Eastern and the Western side, of philosophies or culture, right? The Eastern actually really appreciate silences. They take it in. They're it's their moment to take in the moment, feel the energy of that person, of the situation. Whereas on the Western side, it's hey, let's just talk. Let's keep on talking.
I mean, I've never really thought about silences in meetings. The only connotations I have with silence is when there's an awkward discussion going on. So when I think of silence, I think of, okay, shit's going down, or there's some stagnation in the energy in the room rather than this actually being a nice space for us to appreciate. Yeah. If there was a pause, it's usually because someone's sharing something on their screen, or they are quickly writing a URL in the chat or whatever. I don't really feel that there's that space for a silence or reflection. And you're right about the Eastern philosophy, people wanting to embrace that sort of space for growth. But in the context of a meeting, I always associate that silence with something not happening or something being off.
So I've really looked into this, right? And look at the example of Amazon, right? Everyone knows how they do their meetings in the first 20, 30 minutes. It's legendary and known that they would sit there within the group and they would go through like the agenda of the meeting, and then they would have a conversation. People put their ideas together, and then there'll be a conversation. So I've worked with a lot of people from Amazon. So I've not actually been an employee of Amazon. So if I get some things off, but essentially, like if there's a meeting, there'll be a strict agenda that is being created by the person who's leading the meeting, and there's an opportunity also for people to write their notes, their thoughts into the document, and this would then be all shared before the meeting, so that what's then happened is a document with everyone's thoughts, or especially the person who's organized the meeting, it's all there. So there's real context on what's going to be discussed, and also like talking items. So these are the, I guess the sub conversations that could happen. So it's all been like thought through. Therefore, that stops that whole flow of a conversation. Sometimes I'm sure you've been there, or even with friends, right? You have a conversation, and it's like I see sometimes conversation like trees, and there's like branches, and like you're supposed to stay up the stem, and like, but then suddenly you go down some random branch, and then in the end you're like down some random twig, and you're like, I don't know how we got here, but like that's what I feel happens in meetings. So this is the Amazon's approach was to, hey, look, let's add some structure in. And also probably gives it an opportunity for like introverts to share their thoughts, because when you do have a room full of extroverts, like the introverts sadly sometimes don't get an opportunity to speak, and then you have to speak to them at the end of the meeting. Or I remember I did a LinkedIn post about this, and it's actually like one of my most popular posts, and it was just me talking and mentioning that that introverts, it's not about who's the loudest person in the room, is actually, and the best thing sometimes with introverts is just to actually approach them before or after the meeting, so that you can understand or be aware of their ideas, because they don't get a chance to speak sometimes. But like, the silence like we're doing right now.
Are you an introvert?
I feel I'm both, right? I think all humans have got aspects of both, and I feel that innately we're going to be more than one. Like I feel like we're born to be more introvert and extrovert, but over time you start being more aware and more conscious to hopefully be aware of where you are and become more balanced, right? Because I believe like in life you have to have that balance.
Yeah, I definitely see that with you, mate, because I've known you when you were J Yieldify Radio, which is where like, very energetic, very vocal, quite loud, in a good way. Like it wasn't annoying, or at least to me, it wasn't annoying. I think it was like, high energy. And there's also what I describe as J Shetty Radio, which is where like, you're talking about branches and like making sure that introverts are included, and, you're like feeling energy and stuff. I know it sounds like I'm taking the piss. I am a little bit, but I think it's important to have those. Yeah. It's important to have those different elements in the business, because, and also, bringing that stuff to the workplace, because it's more productive that way. I find it brings me actually to, I didn't put this in the topics, but there's a relatively recent book by this professor at a business school in America. I'm going to butcher exactly where he was. But the book's called The Voltage Effect. I don't know if you've come across it.
No.
He was the economic advisor for Uber, and then he also went to Lyft almost immediately afterwards. And the whole book is about the culture of scale-ups, and actually how you instill a culture that is scalable. And so he cut his teeth basically at Uber, working with Travis in the early days. And it made me think of that actually when you're talking about Amazon, because it was quite an aggressive place to work at. Like you had to be prepared to go to battle when you're in meetings, because otherwise you ain't going to get heard. And, he's an economics professor, so he was used to those sort of like academic battles that you tend to have. But that in a workplace sort of like built the culture around like always doing better. But it meant that loads of people got left behind. Is that something that's necessary for a big business? Can you actually have like a unicorn or a decacorn where we are being a lot more inclusive? Are there any examples of that? I mean, the one that everyone always sort of falls back on is like Patagonia.
I know Elon Musk always takes time with answering his questions. You've seen on like an interview, like he's a prime example of someone who does appreciate the silence and that pause, and he really goes into his trance, because I've realized that it's usually when I take that break, that silence moment, is when I'm able to really check in inside and like try to go deeper in my mind or even in my heart. Like I can go deeper because I'm that silence gives me that peace and that space. Um, and I feel like on meetings, it's really important for the leader to do that, to really make sure that the meeting doesn't go too crazy and too fast. Because I feel like that's what's happened. It's just it keeps on going extremely quickly back and forth, and yeah, just it gets forgot. Like people don't get a chance to speak.
My perspective is perhaps a little bit less forgiving than yours is now. Maybe it's because I haven't gone through as much learning as you, but I'm always like, no, you got to be a little bit more on the hustle side and the grind side. And
Yeah,
if you're not getting yourself heard, then you're just going to get left behind. And this isn't the place for you. That's it. Like, there's no participation awards here. Like, I'm more of the sort of aggressive nature. I still believe, like, you can create a happy workplace, but I'm also of the opinion that there are certain places where certain personalities are either built or they're suited for versus being an inclusive environment for all different sorts of personalities. But my opinion on that might change, in the future.
yeah. Well, look, I think it's always like life's always a paradox. You need some silence and you need some energy, right? It's a bit of both. But anyway, that
That's
was a
it.
good thread.
Um,
Let's. I'm happy to let's. Why don't we jump on one of yours?
we talked a little bit about culture, but I guess the thing that I'm struggling with right now is separating myself from working in the business and focusing on strategy, which is working outside the business. Um, and I was told by a friend of mine to read this book called The E Myth. I don't know if have you read it, The E Myth.
No,
It's quite a
no.
popular book
Okay.
by a guy called Gerber. It's a really good book actually. You should read it and we'll chat about it. But basically, it's about that. It's about how entrepreneurs are essentially sucked into the day to day a bit too much, and they don't get to strategize about how they get their business from point A to point B, and B being, a scale up or something whereby you've created a machine that works by itself. Onboarding a recipe creator is great, but at the same time, I'm still having to like oversee the recipe quality, making sure that it's actually refined to like how I would do it. And it's very hard to like offload my brain to someone else and actually give pieces of the machinery to operate from, in the context of the entire business. What would your advice be?
So there's a few options here, and this happens in probably a lot of it's happened in loads of my businesses as well. So, and this is what I normally do is making sure each unit can really operate without you. And I know that's hard because with the social
Mm,
media and with you doing podcasts, so therefore you need to make sure that everything else is essentially done by other people or your team is supporting, and you're just needed on.
yeah.
So, for example, on actually the recording piece, or on the media, is like, hey, just can you just approve certain content. On the app, it's like, hey, it's getting all produced, but you've got the final look at the on how it looks. You need to essentially be in a place where all of the operational tasks are not being done by you, and you are simply
Mm,
ensuring you are helping to do the vision, the strategy, and you're also the person who's getting the final look. I think your bigger question is like, are all of the arms going to be different business units or they're one? So like, take the classic example like Disney, right? Disney has got its TV subscription, it's got its theme parks, it's got its like animations, it's got
mm,
Pixar. Like each one has got a different CEO, right? And a different person running it. And then there's someone right on the top making sure the business units are going. So I guess you need to work out, it's like, are they all connected truly, right? Or can the same person run the whole thing? In my mind, yours is more like a classic business where you've got different products, different offerings, and there's a COO who is really ensuring that the operations are working smoothly, and they bring you in because you're the CEO, obviously, and you come in when on some of the key strategic decisions. So, and how you do that is like you have to make sure you have to go through each business unit and make sure that like you automate or making sure that operationally it's strong. So it will take a long time. Like you'll find probably there'll be one unit where
mm.
you're just stuck in for really long and it's really frustrating. You're like, crap, man, how am I still in this job? Like, why am I still doing the weeds? But it does take time. You've got to go through each business unit and operationalize it all with so it doesn't need you. And then eventually you can then sit on the top and then hire a COO who just makes sure it's all running smoothly.
So I think I'm sort of doing that, but I need to do that with all the other elements of the business. Like, you know, the structure of the podcast and like, how we upload things to Acast or other podcast players, even like, the way in which we do research and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm thinking through that. I'll keep you updated. It's a slightly left field question. What do you think of business coaches? As in like employing a business coach or like getting a consultant business coach?
I feel they are good. I feel, over time as a business, it'll evolve. Like first business coaches are good because you need help to operate the business, like to essentially create your operating system. So, what sometimes people aren't aware of, okay, if you're running a business and like you're the founder, and an experienced like founder and a CEO, you realize that the best businesses have great operating systems, right? And operating system is really like a dashboard or some form of place where you've got all the metrics, all the initiatives, like everything's all in one place, and you can track the health of the business, right? It's very accessible. However, some like, if you're a founder or first time person, like, person who's running a business, like you don't know how to run a business, right? Like, how do you know the health of a business? It's like, yes, you've got the obvious stuff, but like there is a system. You need to have an operating system to run the business. So a business coach can help you to develop that. My main question on the business coach is like, yeah, what do you want them for? Is it to help you to run the business, or is it more someone to talk to, or when you have challenges, people issues or business issues? Is it a life coaching as well? Like, they're helping you through personal issues as well. So I feel it's very important that you are aware of what you need at that moment in time. More important is like just making sure their experience is also aligned with yours, or as in what you need.
Yeah, because there's a difference, right? I think there's also the monetary value in the exchange of value. So like I can ask you loads of questions about business. You can give me some advice, and that advice comes from the heart. And you're like, you're being very genuine. We've known each other for years or whatever. And I've got a few other people who are in similar situations where they're running businesses, big, small, whatever, startup. But there's a difference when there's a financial exchange. And so I'm paying this guy. I've only just had my first session with him, which is why I wanted to ask you about your opinion on business coaches in general, because some people are like dead against it. They're like, if you're paying someone for this, it offsets the balance of the relationship or whatever, whatever.
I feel the most important aspect in that is, and I think it's Nassim Taleb, and I've read his book. It's great. It's called Skin in the Game. And what's interesting, okay, so what the structure you have is that you've got essentially skin in the game. Like you're paying him, so therefore you're hoping the information he gives is going to be great. And actually, when you do pay, there's a lot of information out there, tests, experiments being done. If you pay for something, you start taking things a bit more serious when you actually apply it versus, if it's given for free. Because if I give you this advice, okay, if I was doing a business coach, I'd be charging probably, thousands of per hour. But, I don't know how much you're paying this person, but like, because I'm giving it to you for free, you may think his information is more valuable. And that's just like how we are programmed, right? But the fact that you're paying him will mean you'll take his action. May mean you may not take my action, and it may be better. But that's an interesting thought, right?
That is a really good point.
Yeah, I feel where we're going with this. Yeah, if you pay, I feel you're more likely to appreciate it. And also, the other item I wanted to say was that skin in the game. Like one thing I do now is that with any advisors or business coaches, or actually I won't say business coaches, but more like advisors or anyone who's around my businesses that I feel can help. I give them options. I give them shares. I don't actually give them cash. Generally, I don't give any cash because I want them to have true skin in the game. Where if my business does well, they do well. If my business doesn't do well, then they don't do well either. We're all one team. We're all tied together. I actually feel that. But I think for coaches, look, it's a bit different. Like that is their livelihood. I think for advisors, so it really depends at what scale you're doing it. But yeah, for advisors, I don't genuinely give any cash. I don't believe. I feel that if you're an advisor, you realize the upside in what we're building, and you'd rather have shares.
Yeah.
The moment they ask for cash, I'm like, no, this is not the right person. So I think skin in the game is.
I agree with that.
Like those tables of like how much the advisor goes, I feel it really depends on how much time they're putting in. I like to look at it from an hour's perspective, and then I tie it back to how much my company's worth, and trying to make sure it's like an exchange which makes sense. And they can also see that, look, I've thought this through. You work out their hourly rate, and I basically work out how much my company's worth, and I create like an option pool essentially. And
Yeah.
my company may double,
Yeah.
triple, go 10, 20, 30x. So they're part of that journey, so they get that upside. So all right, good thread.
What is on your list, bro?
I want to dive deeper into a topic which I think is like really important. Everyone talks about it, and I feel they sometimes don't know where to start, or it's just quite a dense topic, or people don't believe it's powerful. And it's actually the art of storytelling. And
Is this is this going to be a? Oh, I knew it. It's going to
what's
be a
that?
Jay Shetty Radia topic.
I don't
Jay
know.
Shetty Radia's coming out.
No, no, no. It's not actually for me. So, God, this J Shake banner is going to be jokes. So basically, our producer, who's actually on this podcast and he's helping us, Rich, who's from Fascinate Productions, so they help us with that podcast, and they've been an absolute joy to work with. I've actually pinged Rich before. I said, "Hey, Rich, we're going to bring you on," because honestly, a lot of the storytelling techniques that I'm learning through this podcast journey, and just like through I feel it can help in all conversations. A lot of the stuff has been inspired from Rich and also my research as well. But I thought it'd be great to bring him on this segment. So, Rich, if you can come on board, I'd love for you to start this segment.
Okay. Well, yeah. So storytelling, yeah, it's kind of what we do. So hope I know a fair bit about it. I was trying to think about how to kind of apply this to sort of find the most useful stuff that for this audience of kind of entrepreneur type people. So I suppose what sprang to mind was like the last couple of years, storytelling being like a bit of a buzzword in like business and marketing. I think especially last year, it was just everywhere, right? All over LinkedIn and stuff. It was always like storytelling. And I just felt like very few people actually knew what they were saying, and they essentially weren't saying anything. It was just like meaningless marketing waffle that got like popular, a little bit like say Synergy was for a while ago. Like always, like we're either telling stories or we're like finding synergy. And so I suppose like quite a lot of people listening to this might be like, storytelling in a business context is just like a marketing fad that's just going to like fade into obscurity over time. But I mean, like I'm biased obviously because of like what I do, but I think storytelling is worth the hype. So and really like you only just have to look back at its origins to kind of know why that is. So if we look back, I suppose like imagine like family of like prehistoric humans sat outside their cave right around a campfire, like telling each other stories. So they might be having a nice time, granted, but they're not doing this for fun. Like storytelling was born out of necessity to like pass on knowledge through generations, like pre-writing. So the stakes back then were pretty high. So it could be like perhaps you're telling your son a story that's going to like make him remember the difference between one mushroom or like another one. Like one might be really nutritious, the other one might get him like kill him or just send him to another dimension. So like the stakes there like are pretty high, right, in terms of like how well they're going to remember that story. So you know, it's sort of designed, these sort of storytelling techniques have grown with us, and they're basically designed to like make stories stick in our mind. And so that's why it's like super useful for like, you know, communicating in any way. And I mean, they've kind of like, they've evolved with us, as saying like the susceptibility to stories is like deep within this ancient part of our mind. So if you can master it, you can just kind of, you know, you can get people. So yeah, I mean, today, like it's not life and death, but like storytelling could be the difference between you like pitching your business to like that next investor and getting paid to do what you love, or it could be like returning to your like shit 9-to-5 job in recruitment because your startup just like fell apart.
Yeah, dude, I completely agree with that. I mean, if you think about the most sort of impactful bits of media that we're privy to, it really just tap into that evolutionary part of our brain. So TED Talks, if you think about it, the best TED Talks start with a story. And you just think about like the importance of it from an evolutionary point of view, but also like how it kind of sticks in. Like I'm reading this book called Storyworthy at the moment by Matthew Dix. He's like this champion storyteller, like a teacher that turned storytelling. He's got like these crazy ass stories, but it's the way in which you tell stories as well that have sort of that element of surprise, the emotional tug, but also resonance. And the simpler stories and the simpler sort of experience, that's the resonance, not the big fantastical sort of blockbuster thing. I actually talked about this. It's so funny we're talking about this week because I talked about this in my newsletter that went out this week. He has this line in the book that I remember forever. It's storytelling is cinema for the mind. So if you think about it, we're exposed to all this junk food of information, like the blockbuster movies where we don't have to do any thinking. All we need to do is open our eyes, and you've got like a big Transformers over here, or like, you know, a Jurassic Park, an artificial CGI element of a spaceship, whatever. But a story encourages you to actually put your brain into practice. So it's sort of like junk food, which is like, you know, your blockbusters, and then like a more refined sort of healthier dish is a story that you have to kind of work for yourself as well.
Yeah, the cinema of the mind. I was gonna like so with that sort of opening bit, I thought it might be quite good to be a little bit meta. So like used a couple of rules in there, which I was going to talk about. But actually, I did use another one in there, but I didn't think I'd mention it. But you've just talked about it. So the cinema of the mind. So like a good like thing that you can do, like if you want to make a point hit home, is the first thing you do is you create the scene. So I sort of tried to. That's why I was talking about Neolithic man sitting outside of their cave, like round a campfire. It's all kind of done to try and like put you in a place, and once you're in that place, you're a little bit more malleable to start listening. There's another rule as well, actually, which I honestly think is one of the most important ones, and it was, I think he talks about it as well, but I first heard about this through Trey Parker and Matt Stone, and it's called like the but therefore rule. And what that basically is that between every beat of a story, so that could be like a scene, you know, in this instance it was sentences, just like points basically, but between each one there needs to be like a but or a but and then a therefore, or you can kind of mix them up, but there can't be an and. So it's basically like this happened, but then this happened, therefore this happened, but then this happened, and therefore this happened. And that is basically causation. If you start going down the line of this happened and this happened and this happened, this happened, that's the way that everyone is just going to stop giving, like, just caring about what you're saying, basically.
In the book, he talks about why kids are such bad storytellers, because it's just like, you ask them what they did for the weekend. It's like, oh, I did this, and oh, I did this, and actually, I was in America for the stag, and I was spending some time with my two godsons. One's 4, one's 6, and the 6-year-old is going to like a science camp, and it's like geared towards like parents who want to force their kids toward the path of like becoming a doctor, and he's just going to it because they just need something for him to do and not hang out at the house. And I was asking him how his day was, and they had some interesting, cool stuff, like teaching him about the heart, and like they made that sort of like do you remember at school where you had the glass jar and then the plastic diaphragm, like a balloon over it, and then you pull it down and you create negative pressure, and then it has 2 other balloons in your jar, and it basically causes the balloons to inflate like a pair of lungs. So they built that and they did all this other stuff, but the way that he told me the story was like, oh yeah, and we did this and we did this, and I was like, oh man, I've looked at your schedule. I know it's really exciting, but the way you're describing it to me is so boring. Obviously, I didn't have a go at him. I was like, wow, that's amazing. But so
on a storytelling camp
essence,
next.
Don't tell a story. Yeah. I'm going to tell his dad to send him to a storytelling camp. So it's a bit more interesting. But yeah, in essence, the aim of the game is to not tell a story like a 6-year-old.
The other one that I think you guys also taught me, and also I did a bit of research on, I thought was great, was actually like the legendary Steve Jobs, right? I think he's done so many amazing speeches, but the one that probably everyone recognizes was the iPhone one. And what he did on that, and I think some people have noticed on it, was that he really just took everyone on a true journey. It's that roller coaster journey. They said the best stories have got the highs and the lows, and you just keep on going on the journey. And if you remember, it was like this magnificent high, right? And he went, look, I've got something that is literally going to, like, something that's revolutionary, that's going to change the world. And it's an iPhone. But most iPhones, then he goes back down. He goes, but most iPhones aren't very good. They suck. And but ours is really, really good. Ours is different. It's got multi-touch. It's got apps. But is that enough? We've got this. It's like he just constantly just pulls you up and down. It's like
the narrative arc.
Yeah. Okay, that's
the guy to look into if you want to know about that. The guy who kind of coined that term is Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay.
and he's a G. There's like there's some stuff to check out on YouTube, and I mean, I think he's written books about it as well. But yeah, he was the guy behind that for sure. Yeah, and that's quite like I think just bringing people. It's weird. It all ties up into the same thing, right? So the but therefore is the zigs and zags of a story. And it's like spreading the possibility of how big this thing is. Like, so say you're like in a line, but you're like, the story becomes bigger by pushing to extremes. And it's the same with like, if you think about it on the other axis, like that's the highs and lows of the story. And then the other one I was going to talk about is the stakes. So like the stakes of a story, like if there are no stakes, they don't need to be massive. Like, in fact, if they're smaller, it's more relatable, a bit like what Rupy was saying. So if the stakes are a bit more accessible to people, and they're like emotional stakes, for example, like, you know, maybe they're more resonant. But if there are no stakes, no one cares. Like there needs to be basically the possibility of something shit happening if things don't work out. And again, like to try and be like meta on that, like was saying like, you know, feed your kid a mushroom, he dies or not. And then at the end saying in business, work in recruitment or do what you love. Like it's kind of trying to wangle the stakes in, and that's kind of how big the story becomes. And again, I think it's quite easy to do. They're just like simple hacks. Like you can't unsee this stuff or unhear it. Like once you have heard this, you'll start noticing this in everything, and it is like a total superpower.
But how you keep on like seeing and all these things. I just pulled up a blog post that I read probably months ago now, called "The Internet is Having a Kodak Moment." And it basically explains the trajectory of like web from like web 1.0 to 2.0 to now like going to the new era through the story or the narrative of the human evolution and genesis and stuff. So it's like, you know, back in the day when we had web, this is basically when we're like cavemen. So they utilize something that everyone is sort of like used to hearing about to tell what is otherwise quite a complicated story for non-techies. And I didn't know that he was using those sort of techniques either. So yeah, you kind of see it like in everything, even in things that I've done as well. Like my most impactful talks have been where I've talked about my personal story with ill health, and then, you know, everyone's sort of got a story, particularly in the wellness industry, of like how they've overcome something, and then you have that sort of shared connection and bond with patients. You empathize a bit more, and then that leads you down the path of, you know, whatever it might be. And for me, it was food, obviously, but yeah.
Just to counter that, I feel like they got so overdone, some of those personal ones. I don't know what you think, Jay. Like some of those now, I'm like, oh god, I can see. But then maybe that is because I know what the game is. But I'm like, your story is quite similar to the last person. I'm like, share it if it's legit, basically. But yeah, I think that might be because I'm like cynical.
When you're the expert, right? I think whenever you're the expert, you can see things before they happen, and we're all experts in something, right? And we can just go, here we go, we know it. But at the end of the day, like, as long as it's done in a genuine way, you'd hope it's all good. But no, we appreciate everything you've been teaching us on the storytelling side. It's definitely made us hopefully more engaging and more interesting. So no, we appreciate that. And I guess, Rupy, we're probably towards the end of this episode. So is this the moment where we get our other producer, Amit, to give us a bit of a summary? Amit, you ready?
I'm always sort of nervous when Amit comes back on, actually.
He's even got a new mic for this, right? He's got a new mic ready for this as well. Yeah. We bought him a special mic.
So no American Psycho analogies this week.
Amit, turn your camera on, mate.
One sec.
This is why you're not on the main pod.
I just wanted to be a voice. Okay, so the first topic was silence, and it was quite interesting about the meaning that we give silence, because I think normally when people think about silence, they're thinking about awkward pauses, and that's why people jump in. I think what Jay was saying is sometimes silence can be like a chance to reflect. Now you can see why I don't like the camera. I'm basically reading my notes. So
Rupy's the ball breaker on this show, right? You got to just let him have his moment, and then afterwards he goes home, and then he gets in trouble. So he's like the naughty kid who wants to be naughty right now.
Oh man, well, I'm just going to turn the camera off. It's
Yeah,
all right.
I know. Come on, man. Come on,
I think we've been good to you this week. I know I'm nervous about what you're going to say about our subjects. That's why I'm nervous
Bring
laughter.
it.
Yeah. Okay, so the second thing is like the silences kind of set the tone because most companies, like you're always thinking in terms of action and getting things done. But like if you have silence in meetings, it's kind of setting the tone that the company is also pausing and reflecting. So it's not about just engaging and getting things done as quickly as possible. It's like, are we doing the right things? And then in terms of Rupy's weekly woes, so I think the thing was making sure the business can be done without you. So like make yourself redundant and knowing how to scale yourself. That was the key takeaway there. Yeah.
Basically firing myself from different positions after working them.
I remember it's a journey, right? Like it's not gonna happen right away. Like this is for any, like no matter what role you are and if you're leading people, it's just, it does take a bit of time. You gotta have that right processes, as we said. So it's a journey, right? And we'll see if it comes up on next week on Rupy's issues. Let's see.
My problem is that this isn't a therapy session or anything, but I think I'm very hard on myself when it comes to that kind of things. I'm always like, well, I should be where I am today. I should have been here already 6 months ago. Well,
two things, right? And I don't know, it's a summary section, but it's like, is A, like readjusting expectations maybe, right? And number two is like, certain tasks won't get done to your level. And 70%, like I always give myself like, hey, if someone else can do it 70% as good as me, that's good enough.
That's a really good way of thinking about it actually, mate, because like I'm literally going for 100%. I'm like that, Indian parent sort of analogy. Like, why are you lacking 20% here, man? 8% isn't good enough. You've got to go for 100. You always got to go for 100. And that expectation, particularly of employees who are new, is probably not going to be good for the culture. It's not like I'm not berating them or anything, but in my mind, I'm like, no, it needs to be like exactly how I would do it.
Do you know one thing I forgot to share, which was a really random stat on storytelling? Basically, stories versus just like, regular statements, right? I read it's like 22x more likely to remember it with a story, right? Like something like, there's some research done. 22x versus just like classic words. So, if anyone is thinking about becoming a better storyteller, I just think there is a good ROI if you are a data person. So the ROI is there.
But yeah, I wonder if there's like a storytelling course in London that we can go to.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. See, that happens with like comedy stand-ups, right? You do the training and then you then perform it. Even like theatre, there's like things like that. So you basically act for like 3-6 months, and you then show your show to your family. So that I know those exist. I'm not sure actually is one for storytelling. I guess it'd be quite similar to stand-up comedy, but we can look into it. Maybe we can add it in the link.
I could never do stand-up comedy. I would crap myself, man. There's no way I would give it up in a stand-up comedy. I think that's like the most stressful job.
So I think it's another skill for us that will probably help us through this podcast. Not this podcast, but just through a life. So I don't know. It might be something we can look at. I'm up for it if you are. I'll take you offline and I'll play with you to convince you. But good segment or good show today, and on to the next one.